Hey, blessings and welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're in First Peter, and man, what a book! What a ride! First Peter, when Peter was an apostle of Jesus, he was with Jesus. He was the leader of the apostles, and he's the guy that we see just incredible life change from the Gospels when he was with Christ to Acts when he's preaching. Almost doesn't even seem recognizable as the same guy we know in the Gospels. But here we're in First Peter, and one of the things I like about First Peter is you can take all the books that Paul wrote, and we think he wrote Romans, but Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, Philippians, First and Second Thessalonians. Just the volume that Paul wrote on. Peter also wrote, but it's very condensed, and it's not basically, Peter and Paul wrote about a lot of the same things, and we'll see some of that here today. But it's like taking all the books that Paul wrote and putting them into a book called First and Second Peter. And today we're just in First Peter, and I'm telling you right now, there's no way. When I got to chapter 3, I basically quit making notes because I had already gone so far that I knew we wouldn't be able to finish today. And that's why right now I'm not worried about getting into it, because we're not going to be able to finish First Peter today. It's going to be upon you to read it yourself, and you probably already have, but to make some notes on some of the incredible things he wrote about. But I went ahead and kept reading. I did make one note on a verse in chapter 3, 2 notes on verses in chapter 4, 3 notes on verses in chapter 5, but even though I read them and I still studied it, I just didn't make a whole lot of notes on those because I knew we weren't going to get to it today. But you can still have the notes that I have written. And I'm not even going to go over all the notes I've got here in the beginning, because some of those in 3, 4, and 5 are law enforcement specific. I want to get to, or not law enforcement specific, but they're law enforcement takeaways. You know what I'm talking about. In chapter 1:1, Peter says he's speaking to the chosen, to the ones who are chosen. We know we're chosen. And in verse 7 he says, so that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Christ. Well, our faith is also, I don't want to say it's perishable, but it's like a perishable skill. If you don't keep your skills up, like pistol, if you don't keep your pistol skills up and you quit practicing at the range, a little further down the road, those skills are going to start to deteriorate, and you're not going to be as good as you would be if you were constantly practicing. The Spirit's the same way. We got to live in the Spirit daily, and we've got to fight that battle. But if we quit reading our Bible, it doesn't take long for us to start reverting back to the flesh. We've got to be in God's Word every day, and we've got to be practicing the Spirit and being in those battles daily. In verse 13, he tells us, therefore prepare your minds for action. Keep sober in spirit. Fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. He gives us 3 things here that we've got to practice. We got to take these thoughts captive. The battle is in the mind, and these things that come into through our eyes and through our ears, as they come in, we've got to filter them and take them captive. If it is not a good thought, if it is fleshy and lustful, we have got to take it captive to the obedience of Christ right then. Don't dwell on it. Either get rid of it or fight it, whatever you've got to do. Next, we got to stay sober in the spirit. I mean, we got to be aware and alert constantly. If you're drunk, on something else, you're not aware of what's going on around you. You're not thinking straight. So it says, be sober in the spirit, man. You got to be on the alert and be ready for those attacks from the flesh, because they're going to come when you least expect them. And then it says, fix your hope on Christ alone. We know this. Don't set your hope on your retirement. Oh, when I finally get there, then I'll have peace, and then I can do the things that maybe the Bible tells me to do. No, we got to start doing those things right now. We got to live in this moment, because we're not promised tomorrow, and we can't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worries of its own, as the Bible says. And then be obedient in verse 14 through 16. as you've been called. 2:1. I love this. Chapter 2, verse 1. There's this period of self-examination to look for ourselves and see if there's any anger in me. Is there deceit in me? Is there hypocrisy? Is there envy? Is there slander? Well, of course, all these things are in me. This is my flesh. I live in this flesh every day, whether I like it or not. So deceit, hypocrisy, they're all here constantly. And they all want to gain control of my mind, and they want me to react on these things, to act on them. So we've got to fight these things constantly. So take a period of time, maybe after this is over, to look at yourself and say, what circumstances bring about my hypocrisy? When am I the worst hypocrite that I can be? What makes me really angry? When do I get envious of people? Slander. When do I talk crap about people? When I'm just bad mouthing somebody. What brings that on? Because the reason we need to self-reflect and recognize when these things come on, once we realize what circumstances or situations put us in that position where we start vomiting at the mouth about somebody, then we can recognize next time, hey, I'm fixing to go into that situation, and that's what causes me to be angry. That's what causes me to start slandering somebody or talking bad about them. Knowing is half the battle. When you know what puts you in that situation, you can either avoid that situation or you can go into it with the battle mentality of, I'm going to fight this fight and my spirit's going to win. The flesh is not going to lead me into this anger or this slander or this envy or this malice, things that do not please God. I'm going to be in the spirit and I'm going to win that battle. I wish we could just spend the whole time on that. That's such an important lesson for all of us to understand. What are our triggers that bring about these bad behaviors? We need to develop a plan, and we need to fight that battle. Man, I'm going to skip over some of this. Chapter 2, verses 13 through 17 remind me of Romans chapter 13. This is what Paul wrote in Romans 13, but Peter writes it in a condensed version here in 2:13 through 17. It says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether to a king as the one in authority or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. For such is the will of God, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. That's Romans 13, just put in 3 verses. Then in 18, Paul addresses servants, and we are servants. We're employed to serve people, and that's who Paul is talking to. And he says, servant, be submissive to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. Do you have an unreasonable supervisor? A supervisor that just you don't like? Go back to chapter 2, verse 1. Do the self-examination with that supervisor. Do they make you angry, deceitful, hypocrite, envious, slanderous? If a supervisor does, start creating a battle plan. So next time you come into contact with that supervisor, you're ready to fight that battle, and you're ready to show love, peace, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control instead of anger, envy, slander, malice, all those things. Man, run way out of time. Didn't even get to some of the ones I wanted to get to, 3, 4, and 5. Law enforcement takeaways, man, all throughout this thing. So I'm going to leave you with chapter 5, verse 8. It says, be of sober spirit. Be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. He wants to devour you and me because we're living in the spirit. He wants you to live in the flesh. So, man, I'll see you tomorrow. We're going to be in Jude and 2 Peter. So read ahead, and in the meantime, be safe. Look out for the devil.